Now we're going to lead you to some other stories about the smell of marijuana. This first one also comes from hightimes.com, and it's entitled Denver Uses Nasal Ranger to Weed Out Pot Odor Complaints. Now, this nasal ranger, that's not like a guy whose job is to be the nasal ranger. No, we're talking about a olfactory sensing device. It's a patented device that augments the human sense of smell to ascertain if a given odor is beyond the acceptable legal parameters. Now, in Denver, this is handled by the city's Department of Environmental Health. They examine cultivation sites and they determine whether or not it is a finable violation, depending on how bad the smell might be, or how strong the smell might be, I should say. Last year, there were 16 complaints filed with the city for the whole year, and that was up from 7 complaints that they had in 2010. I don't know what they had for 2011, but whatever. All right, so the smell complaints are rising, of course, as more people were growing their medical gardens outdoors, but now have the right to grow their own recreational plants as well. Now, these field meters that the environmental health investigators are using are designed to check whether or not the odor is reaching a ratio of what's called an 8-to-1 ratio, where I guess if 1 part odor versus 8 parts rest of the air, right? Basically, you're coming up with a fraction. If the odor is 1/8 or more of what you're smelling, then it's a smell violation. And this odor ordinance could be a fine as much as $2,000 for the smell of your pot plants. But that's not the only standard. Even if the smell is below that 8-to-1 ratio, the nasal ranger reading isn't necessary if 5 households complain about a site's odor within a 12-hour period. So if you got a neighbor that doesn't really like your pot smell, if he can go round up 4 other neighbors to complain, then you're going to get the violation. And again, that can be up to a $2,000 fine. Now, Denver contrasts quite a bit with what we got in Seattle. The story comes from the Seattle PI. Will we just have to live with the smell of growing marijuana? And it says that in the Seattle and Puget Sound region, the agency designated to handle odors doesn't have rules on the books or any leverage to do anything about marijuana smells. The agency in Seattle is called the Puget Sound Clear Air Agency, and they get complaints about marijuana odors as well. The supervising inspector there, named Mario Pedroza, says there's really nothing they can do. They've talked about it internally, but there's nothing they can do because they're not involved in issuing permits for any marijuana grow operations, so they can't withhold a permit, right? And the smell isn't coming from any process they have control over. Like the laws there are written up in such a way that they can control, say, the smoke from a chimney. So when they get their complaints about the smell of pot, their only recommendation is to track down whichever agency issued the building permit or the business license and file a complaint with them. So nobody really has a place to turn. And of course, these Seattle folks also aren't using any nasal ranger technology. Pedroza says, quote, "We use our very own noses," end quote. And this is something we as marijuana reformers are going to have to think about because personally, I love the smell of growing marijuana. I think it smells fantastic, right? But a lot of people don't feel that way. And this is going to be a complaint we're going to hear as marijuana becomes more accepted and legalized, is people who don't like it and don't like the smell wanting to fight that odor complaint against us. We're going to have to figure out what to do about that. And for a long time, indoor growers have been using all sorts of technologies, carbon filtration and so on, to be able to deal with protecting against the odor because the odor could get you busted. But now that the odor won't get you busted, I'm afraid a lot of people are going to move away from using any of those techniques, and we'll see more and more of these complaints. Also, because more people will be growing outdoors. This is obviously a bigger concern in Denver, where they have recreational grows allowed, versus Washington, where recreational grows aren't allowed. But still, as marijuana becomes more recognized in recreational or medical fashion, there's going to be more grows, there's going to be more complaints, and we need to get ahead of this and try to figure out how we're going to advocate for changes in the law while still respecting the rights of our neighbors to be free from unwanted smells. That said, I used to have a Korean neighbor that cooked kimchi all the time, and that shit smells awful. Can we get an ordinance for that? That's all I say, man, is let's just be treated equally. I want marijuana smells to be treated like any other smells. They shouldn't be singling out just marijuana. Think about that. We'll be right back.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.